What's up, Planeswalkers? It's your boy K-Dog. Another fun video for you guys. This one looking at a Mardu list based around Kaalia, Zenith Seeker. For red, white, and black, you get a 3/3 flying vigilance. So that's pretty solid stats right there. However, when she enters the battlefield, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You can reveal an angel, a demon, and or a dragon card from among them and put them into your hand. So she's going to dig 6 cards deep, and any number of angels, or excuse me, one of each of angel, demon, or dragon you get to put into your hand. So you can draw up to 3 cards. You should be drawing 1 or 2 at the minimum. And so we're kind of a mid-rangey deck. And so the way we're going to get there before we get into what those angels, demons, and dragons are, starting off here in the 2-drop slot, we have 4 Charming Prince. So 2/2 for 2. When it enters, we can scry 2. So we can fix our draws. If we're short on lands, we can kind of look for those 3rd and 4th lands. We can gain 3 life, so against aggressive decks like mono red, we can kind of gain some life and help us stay in the game a little bit longer, buy us some time. Or you can exile another target creature you control and return to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. So you kind of flicker one of your own creatures, and then it'll get it re-enter the battlefield trigger. So if you do this with like Kaalia, then you'll be able to dig for more of your angels, demons, and dragons all over again. So Charming Prince, all 3 modes work perfectly well in this deck, and just having a 2/2 blocker on turn 2, you don't mind just chump blocking there and throwing it away. That's not a problem. And like for some removal here, 2 Angrath's Rampage. It's very important to kind of have sacrifice removal in this format, with things like Dream Trawler, Paradise Druid, and that sort of thing. This also hits planeswalkers or artifacts. As for black and red, choose 1, target player sacrifice an artifact, a creature, or a planeswalker. So just kind of a nice versatile piece of removal. And same thing here with Banishing Light as a 2 of. Exiles any non-land permanent the opponent controls until Banishing Light leaves the battlefield. So it just kind of targets whatever is relevant at the time. And a couple Murderous Riders for 2 black and 1. You get instant speed removal for creatures or planeswalkers. Of course, we do lose the 2 life. Then we get to play it down as a 2/3 lifelinker afterwards. And Bonecrusher Giant also has a 2 of. 2 mana stomp, 2 damage to any target. Damage can't be prevented. And then for 3 mana, you get a nice 4/3 creature that when it becomes a target of a spell, it deals 2 damage to that spell's controller. We don't have anything that's going to be targeting it, so if our opponent has some spot removal, then they'll be taking 2 damage. So nice way to kind of ping in. And of course, just having a 4/3 body works really, really well. And just for some kind of instant speed interaction, a couple of Mortifies, as we can destroy target creature or enchantment for 1 white black. And Deafening Clarion for those kind of aggressive decks. Just nice way to kind of clear the board here in the early turns. For 1 red and white, we can choose 1 or both. Deal 3 damage to each creature, or creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. So if you draw this top deck this in the late game, you got some of your angels and demons and things like that out. You can just use it to gain a bunch of life back and kind of help stabilize. And just the 3 Kaalias, as we kind of went over a little bit. She is legendary, and depending on your hand, you may not want to even play her on turn 3, like if you're short on lands, because that's more of what you're going to be focused on is drawing lands, so you can kind of curve out into those demons and dragons, so you might even want to wait until like turn 3 or 4, especially if you need to Shatter the Sky, which is 2 of here. Each player who controls a creature power 4 or greater draws a card, then destroy all creatures. So most of our creatures would actually qualify, so if we do need to clear the board here in the late game, we'll at least get the card draw off of it. But mostly it's just there to kind of play on turn 4 to kind of clear the board, and then we can kind of start playing our Kaalia down and getting our angels and demons and dragons online. And just kind of a little bit better than Kaya's Wrath because we are a 3-color deck, and it's just a double white instead of double white and double black. That can make it a little bit tricky sometimes. Alright, and here we are onto our first payoff here, Nightmare Shepherd. We're trying to kind of balance it as much as possible and not going to be like all in like 4 ofs and things like that. So just the 2 Nightmare Shepherds, 4/4 flyer, demon. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you can exile. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a 1/1 and a nightmare. Alright, so this works really well obviously with like Charming Prince or Kaalia to kind of get to re-enter the battlefield triggers and things like that. Otherwise, it's maybe not that relevant with some of our other bigger creatures, but still just very powerful creature in and of itself. And just the 1 Spawn of Mayhem, just to kind of just for kind of expand our portfolio of creature types. Just the 1 of here, because we are kind of a slower deck. The upkeep trigger where we deal 1 damage to each player. It can hurt us sometimes against if we get out to a little bit of slower start against the aggressive decks. But if we are against like a slower deck, another slower deck, then this is actually works really well. And just having a 4/4 flying trample that can be 4 mana or even 3 sometimes with the spectacle cost works really, really well. And of course, if we do start getting our life total load, if we have 10 or less life, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it works really well in the late game as well. And we also have 3 of Seraph of the Scales. It's a 4/3 for 2 white and black. And you can pay white to give it Vigilance or black to give it Death Touch. And then it has the Afterlife too. So if it dies, then you get to create 2 1/1 spirit tokens. So again, other than the exile removal, it works really, really well as a nice versatile, resilient threat. And a couple of Aurelias. She is legendary as a 2/5 for 2 red and white. And she does have Mentor. At the beginning of combat in your turn, choose up to 1 target creature you control. Until end of turn, that creature gets +2/+0, gains Trample if it's red, and gains a Vigilance if it's white. So this works really well with the rest of our creatures to either give them Trample or Vigilance, except for some of our demons, obviously, that are just black. But the dragons will work really well with this. And we also have a couple of Doom Whisperers. 6/6 for 5 is a pretty sweet value. And also has Trample in addition to Flying. And we can pay 2 life to Surveil 2. So obviously if we've been able to Deafening Clarion and get some life back, then we can definitely take advantage of the Surveil part. Otherwise, against kind of mid-rangey and control matchups, we can kind of use the Surveil to kind of make sure that we fix our draws when our life total can be used much more readily as a resource. And then 3 of Skarrgan Hellkite, just a 4/4 flying dragon for 5 is a pretty sweet deal. It has Riot, so we can either give it haste, or we can put a +1/+1 counter on it. And if we choose to put a +1 counter on it, it has the activated ability here for 4 mana. We can deal 2 damage divided as we choose among 1 or 2 targets. So against kind of like smaller go wide type decks like mono white, things like that, we can kind of put the counter on it, and now we have a nice 5/5, and then we can, following turn, we can use its activated ability to start picking off our opponent's creatures, and then we can kind of stabilize from there. And then at the top end, just 1 of Drakuseth. It's a 7/7 for 7 mana. So, it can be kind of tricky to get the 7 mana, but if you can get this guy online, then it's super, super powerful. Great way to really close out the game. Because when it attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target, and then 3 damage to each of up to 2 other targets. So that's super, super powerful if you get to that in late game. But, 7 mana is a little expensive, and especially we're not like reanimated or anything like that. So just the 1 of, and of course legendary as well. And going over the mana base, trying to keep things simple as possible. We got 2 plains, 2 swamp, 2 mountain. Of course, all the shock lands. The Godless Shrine, Blood Crypt, and Sacred Foundry is 4 ofs. And also, since we don't have turn 1 plays, we're going with the temples: Temple of Silence, Temple of Malice, Temple of Triumph, just 2 of each. And then just the 1 Fabled Passage for just a little bit of fixing, since we do have some pretty intense mana costs, with double black, double red, and that kind of thing. And so 25 lands in total because we are a pretty mana intensive deck. Going over the sideboard real quick. We got 1 Soul Guide Lantern, just kind of some way for us to interact with graveyards, escape, and things like that. 3 Agonized Remorse, obviously to deal with mid-range and control matchups, so we can kind of pick out cards from their hand. Another Banishing Light for some removal, depending on what we're matched up against. Pharika's Libation. We can use this for also somewhat Angrath's Rampage, but this also hits like enchantments, so like those enchantment creatures that just came out in the most recent set, Fasces and things like that. It gives us a way to kind of deal with those. Another Deafening Clarion for those really aggressive matchups. We can just bring this in, and if we need some more powerful removal, especially in the form of exile, we have a couple Eat to Extinctions and a couple Kaya's Wrath. If the Deafening Clarion maybe isn't quite enough, like against Gruul and things like that, we can side those out and bring in some more Kaya's Wraths as a way to kind of have still some board wipes. And then 1 of each of the interventions, just for kind of some versatility. Erebos Intervention, especially if we need to gain some life while removing some creatures. Purpose Intervention if we need removal or kind of a way to help push damage across. And then Heliod's Intervention for artifact or enchantment heavy matchups, and perhaps even just for the life gain as well. So pretty versatile sideboard, and even the main deck, we have a pretty, a lot of 2-ofs and things like that. So we're just kind of trying to make sure we have answers when we need them in the early game, and then we can kind of get our big creatures down, and that should hopefully take over the game from there. That's kind of the idea. So it's fun to revisit this deck. I know when Kaalia came out, that was one of the first cards I was excited to really build around. I definitely had a lot of fun with it, so it's been fun kind of coming back and kind of updating it a little bit, tweaking some of the sideboard and the mana base, things like that. So let's jump into some best of 3 and see how we do today. Should probably get rid of that. Alright, here we are up against Pendragon. Okay, looks like we'll be on the draw, that's fine. Missing black. But we have these temples to kind of help fix our draws. So I think I'm fine with keeping it. We'll see what our opponent is up to. Black, go. Looking for, yeah, at least one black source. We can shock that in later, so we'll just stick with the temple next turn up against the Dimir. So, thought erasure perhaps? Nope. Protein Thaumaturge. Nice. I don't think we need a second black source right now. I think we're just looking for more answers. So depending on what they do, we could Mortify or Angrath's Rampage next turn. And we do have enough lands to where playing Kaalia out might even be reasonable. It's kind of a curious deck so far. I think we just go for Kaalia. It's a nice 3/3 body. We do have the lands to play whatever we draw, and we do get just the one Aurelia, so that's fine. If they don't have removal, then we're in good shape. And with all these lands, we should actually be able to curve out into our Drakuseth. Unless they have something particularly large, then we should be in good shape. Unless, of course, they have an immediate answer for it, but they still have to deal with our Kaalia and this Aurelia that we're about to drop. Slimebind, okay. Now they're going to copy our Kaalia. Get a 3/3 flyer. Seems pretty good. So next turn, probably just tap land. And probably deal with this Protein Thaumaturge. Seems fine. And that way they can't copy our big boys or girls. We got 4 lands down, 2 more in hand, so 1 land away from Drakuseth, but still a couple turns away. The way things are going, should be able to cast that on curve. And of course, they are in blue, so they could have some counter spells, although they seem like they're pretty all-in creatures and enchantments, though, with the Thaumaturge. It's my kind of a fun build. And our Kaalia, which already has a pseudo removal enchantment on it. The next turn we can actually Aurelia, and then the Aurelia can buff the Kaalia, so it can at least attack in for 1, I believe. If they have some trick, they want to kill it, and that's fine. Fine with just dropping Aurelia. We can attack in for 1 with Vigilance. Now both of our creatures have vigilance, so we're in a pretty decent spot. We do have our 7 lands for Drakuseth here in a couple turns, so that's pretty fun to look forward to. So next turn we could probably Angrath, Rampage, and Kaalia. Our opponent does have a lot of cards in hand though. We'll just attack first. So just have the one creature. I think we'll just go for the Angrath Rampage now. And I'm guessing they'll hold up maybe a counterspell. They have 4 cards in hand, they're not doing much. I think if they had more of these slime binds or whatever, they probably would have just played it. Counterspell, great. And I think I'm fine with just... I don't think we need to flicker it. We are at 14. I think just the Scry is probably all we need. Don't need our third Kaalia, but Skarrgan looks pretty good. So if they tap out, we'll definitely go for the Drakuseth. Otherwise, we'll probably just do the Skarrgan Hellkite and see if they have a counter for that. Seems like our best path here. Pretty desperate when you do counterspell just to keep your Frostlinks alive. Okay, 4 cards in hand. Looks like they've got some more enchantment, pseudo removal. Severed Strands. I haven't seen that card in a long time. Sure. They do still have mana open, which is a little disconcerting, so they could have a counterspell still, but I think we just go for Drakuseth. Okay, it results. Hopefully he has vigilance, so it doesn't really matter. Now they have an empty board, so no more Severed Strands, unless they have another creature to play. Hellkite down with haste. Attack. That's 4. Alright, Drakuseth. Man, I love that card. Alright, interesting deck from our opponents. What do we want to do here? So we do have some counter spells. These enchantments don't really bother me too much, especially with the Charming Prince. Can just kind of flicker them if we need, just to get rid of those. And Clarion seemed to clear everything they were doing. Probably better just have more targeted removal. Didn't seem like that enough creatures, or we need to bring in the Kaya's Wrath or the Clarion. Intervention could be good if they do have a lot more enchantments. And do we want any hand hate? It seems like all these Murderous Riders and things seem like they interact well with what they're doing. I'm not overly concerned about their counter spells. I'm guessing they just have a few. We'll just do our best to play around it, and if it costs us, then we can just side in the Agonizing Remorses here next match, game 3. Okay, got all of our colors. Hand seems pretty reasonable. Sacred Foundry down, so we can either Stomp or Charming Prince next turn. Theater Strix. I think we just want to keep their board clear, so just kill it now for any potential counter spells. And next one we can either Charming Prince or shock one of these in for a Mortify or Banishing Light. Okay, missing black this time, that's good for us. It will limit some of their options. Verity Circle, okay. We'll just go for the Scry. I have plenty of land, so we'll get rid of those. And we can Mortify the Verity Circle, so they can't tap down our stuff. Let's see, without flying. Actually, that doesn't really do a whole lot against us, does it? Didn't realize it was only flying creatures. Could be just sitting on a counter spell here. So I would much rather resolve this Kaalia. Kaalia should draw some cards. Some be missing their land drops. We'll just go for it. Okay, resolve. Perfect. There we go. 2. This game looking pretty much over at this point, unless they have some way to deal with our board. Pretty unfortunate that our opponent seemed to be stuck on lands there, but yep. Kaalia is a pretty fun deck. Definitely once it gets going, then it's pretty hard to stop. And yeah, that's the build. I think is Charming Prince works really well. You need some kind of a way to stabilize in the early game and kind of fix your draws, and then you can just kind of get to your bigger threats later on. And yeah, just close out the game. All right, thanks for watching, guys, and look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care.